Hi, this is Mark. In this video, I'm going to explain why women's standards are on the rise. To start off, from a biological standpoint, women are designed to choose a mate or a male who is deemed the most desirable for the survival of the future generation. It's predicated on the survivability and genetic potential, but there is variation with respect to health and so forth. But that is the initial premise, is that women naturally seek men who are best fit to survive. So therefore, and this is based on the demands of society. So if the society becomes increasingly complex, which is what we are naturally heading towards, increased complexity, you add more variables into the equation. And once that happens and the demand rises, then it is natural tendency to seek or raise the bar. But men naturally strive to progress and adapt to the environment. That is a natural process. So we are moving forward as society as a whole moves forward. But and so we know based on this, ideally, women will select a male who is deemed best fit within their range of whatever subjective range or whatever preference range of attraction essential. Now, if there exists a pool of men with the same value, personal value, same job, everything's the same except the distribution of attraction and looks. A woman will naturally choose the most attractive. That is biologically uh, necessary, and it doesn't make sense to choose the lesser option. But obviously, it's subjective, so they're going to choose the optimal case, provided there's no bias due to looks. So this is just a natural process, but we don't. That's not reality. Reality, there's a distribution of value that men bring to the table. It's transient. It's not static. It's cyclic. It's ever changing. Um, so therefore, attraction becomes cyclic, but it always exists within a range, and you always have to satisfy the minimum criteria. So the way I view it is there's a range of attraction. For instance, a woman who is heterosexual is going to have a skew in the masculine direction, meaning they're going to be attractive to masculinity. So it's going to be skewed in that direction. But if it becomes more fluid, it can go both ways, or you can expand it, broaden it, or it can become narrow. But what I've noticed is it's proportional to options, number of options. And we know in this Western world of opportunity and possibilities and so forth, and due to globalization and the advent of dating apps, and we can travel to different locations, and we know what exists from the extremes. The extremes are being funneled in at higher frequency. We're exposed to higher resolution, better graphics for video games. Our food is becoming more precise, or it's becoming more higher quality in certain regions. We're constantly striving to perfect things, even though perfection doesn't exist. But we are getting rid of defects. We are moving towards, just the higher resolution movies and whatnot. And therefore, over time, because we adapt to this, we become less receptive. Our reward system becomes less receptive. So you got to think in this society with the land of opportunity. Why do we have high incidence of depression? Why? When there's so much possibility to seek reward, pleasurable experience, and so forth. Well, there's many variables, there's many reasons. Partly the extremes, we're exposed to contrast. Our position, we could either compare or contrast relative to others. Another factor is, of course, the adaptation, like I mentioned. And this is analogous to like playing a video game. You take a video game of high resolution, you play the same video game, but now you're going to revert to the past when the graphics were lower and it's less resolution. Well, in the present moment or the future, what's going to happen is actually in the future, the reward's going to be depreciated, because in the present moment, the reward basically is a function of the resolution in the graphics. The higher the resolution of graphics, the more feedback. But in the past, you would receive an exponentially higher feedback because you're not adjusted to it. and it's so novel to you. It's so new. It's so distinct. It makes you distinction is what fuels the fire. That's why men are attracted to women because they're distinct. They're masculine. Make women feel feminine. It follows. So therefore, when you have this distinction, it pulls you. It causes you to gravitate towards it. It causes your feelings. You feel greater. You get that validation. And a lot of times we want to go with the flow. So basically, what I'm saying is if you take a video game, for instance, with low resolution, in the present moment, it's going to be depreciated reward. Even though in the past it was appreciated, it was greater magnitude, but then it dampens over time, exponential dampening. And so that's why naturally we are inclined to progress, we are inclined to improve, because if we become stagnant, it depreciates the reward. It becomes, we start noticing the defects to more higher sensitivity. Just think about with cosmetics. Women now, they get rid of defects, they become more attractive, and therefore they get more options. This holds true because if you are more attractive, if you can skew that in a positive direction, you expand the options. It makes sense. Now we have dating apps. Women naturally, we know, seek the optimal options. So because we're so acclimated to high resolution, people nowadays are. It's like the McDonald's dollar menu, filters and whatnot. You're creating images that aren't a representation of reality. It's not a representation of what you look like in reality. But women know they are attractive enough. Most men, if you get on Tinder, are very attracted to a large proportion of women. Women, because they're the selectors, must choose the highest quality out of the pool. They have to narrow it. They have to raise the lower bar because they can't. They naturally, like, it's like you have a platter of food. You're always going to strive to minimize based on your appetite. You can't eat it all, so you minimize. You raise the lower bar. Simply, women can't be bombarded with too many messages, so they have to raise the lower bar. They have to, and basically what this implies is they're going towards the majority of men. So therefore, women start selecting a narrower pool, the majority of men, and these men love the attention as well. They are competing. The competition's steep, but men naturally seek women in their early years. So, so once women get older, competition gets a little bit steeper for them, so they have to kind of minimize their standard. And this naturally happens. This settling for less when they get older, because it is a function of options. And males need to understand this. If men had the were choosers, imagine that scenario. The reversal. It would be the same scenario like on Tinder. You'd select the high. If you had the power to choose, you choose the highest, maximum reward. You're not going to choose lesser. So this is a natural process. So men are, at the lower tier are getting kind of pushed out at higher frequency, and that's why in this day and age we have more. Um, it's like the polls are getting spread further apart. Even the division between the conservatives and Democrats, like the polls are getting spread further apart. The distance between the rich and the poor, it's getting pulled further apart. The distance between attraction, like what is the pool of attraction, it's getting skewed north and it's getting pulled further apart. This is just like the pattern that's happening. It's inevitable. It's a function of the environment. It's basically implies that men, it's almost like a society trying to destabilize in some form. But again, like women cannot select, like especially because when population gets to the upper tier, it's natural to have some convergence to a limit. There has to be stabilization, and this is kind of what's happening. Like I said, with the resolution, we're getting adapted. Therefore, less and less men are attractive to women. This is serious because we're so accustomed to high resolution. And as that gets dampened, that means what used to be attractive is not attractive as much of a reward. It becomes less novel because we know now what exists. Think about the extremes. We're not exposed to the extremes very frequently in a day-to-day basis, but we are exposed by social media. It's exposed by the fringes of society. It gets funneled in, and it's very distinct. It's very unique, and that's naturally strive for that. Something that is not average. It's not naturally people seek distinction or some uniqueness. At the upper tiers, you tend to have that. At the average, a little bit more disparity. But what I've noticed, one thing I've noticed, is that um, there's always, like, in terms of hope, for men, of course, what's kind of happening is, like, I think the range of attractions being skewed more in the positive direction, but uh, that they're most men, at least most, like if you're relatively average, have pretty good opportunity. And if you show, value, personal value, and you at least meet the minimum threshold, you can definitely prove yourself worthy to an extent. It depends where you are on the spectrum. But the good news, like, you want to be enough inside the zone of attraction to yield profit. But the good news is that the spectrum from masculinity to femininity is 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 basically not just skewed to the masculine side. Some women prefer feminine looking men. Some women are bisexual who prefer both, and so forth. So you can always find a range that you overlap in. Maybe the probability is lower. Maybe, always it's going to be, life is not fair, therefore the probability is not favorable in certain situations if you're on the lower tier. But there's always a range, there's always options. But even then, like, life is not about sex. Life is not about attainment of, or, whether you don't define it based on, your attainment or of attainment of the prize, or just being able to swoon a woman and be able to get even a relationship. It's it shouldn't dictate your the life, because eventually things will fall into place more so when you focus on your own life, because the probability may be non-favorable, but it can increase if you become positive. It can increase if you get, work on towards be driven, very driven towards a career. It can increase if you improve your health, if you work out, if you lose weight. I mean, there's always defects. We all have defects, but the thing is, I mean, you can even get plastic surgery these days if you want to. So there's always opportunities to, make the change, mitigate the problem. So that's the thing. Negativity really depreciates health, so that causes depreciation in value overall. So, yeah, things are happening. This is based on environmental change. It's inevitable. It doesn't happen for all cases, but it's just a general trajectory, just because majority of people tend to sway in one direction or the other based on social conditioning and so forth, and based on the um, where we are centering our energy, and, like, for instance, social media, so forth. But if you go to, like, an academic environment, things will change. If I go to a bar, my probability of success is very low, because expectation of be able to flirt or play the game is high, and I don't do so. But if I go to, like, academic environment, it may change. If I go to a different environment, it may change. So it's a function of the niche. It's a function of the environment as well. So that's just what I've learned. It's based on the pattern, and obviously attraction is a pattern. So you got to find the most favorable niche. And yeah, that's all I have. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next.